A desperate young woman borrows luxury, lies, and identity for 24 days to escape poverty, only for the truth to expose her brutally on day 25. December always arrived quietly in Caroline's village, but its weight was heavy. The harmattan dust sat on rooftops and skin alike, and the evenings grew longer, colder, and more judgmental. Caroline sat on a cracked wooden bench outside her mother's mud house, watching children chase each other barefoot while women returned from the stream with buckets balanced on tired heads. She was 23 years old, young enough to dream, old enough to feel afraid. Beautiful, yes, everyone said that, but beauty did not buy food. Beauty did not repair roofs. Beauty did not stop hunger from knocking every night. Her slippers were faded, their soles thin like paper. Her dress had been washed too many times, the color long gone. When she glanced at her reflection in a broken mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, it told her the same story it told every morning. A pretty face trapped in an empty life. December was coming. In the village, December was not just a month. It was a reminder. It was the season when successful sons returned from the city, engines roaring, confidence loud. When Range Rovers raised dust on laterite roads. When mothers whispered prayers and daughters straightened their backs. When marriage talks filled the air, sweet and cruel at the same time. December was hunting season. Caroline watched girls her age prepare quietly. New dresses appeared. Hair was redone. Smiles became careful and calculated. At church, seats were chosen strategically. At weddings, introductions happened over plates of rice and bottled drinks. Everyone knew the rules, even if no one said them aloud. And Caroline? She had nothing. Her father's small pension barely kept the house alive. Her mother worked endlessly, yet poverty stayed. Suitors came once, twice, then stopped. Poor boys, struggling boys, boys with empty pockets like hers. She smiled politely and said no. Not because she was proud, but because she was tired. That evening, as she stirred thin soup over firewood, she finally asked the question that had been burning her chest. Mama, why do rich men never marry girls like me? Her mother laughed, but it was not a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh that carries years of disappointment. Because rich men don't see suffering, she said gently. They see shine. They marry what looks expensive, not what is tired. Those words did not leave Caroline's ears. Later that night, lying on a thin mattress, she scrolled through her phone. Faces glowed on the screen. Girls from villages like hers, now living soft lives. Designer bags, smooth hair, foreign trips, engagement rings held up proudly for the world to admire. None of them looked poor. None of them looked like her. A dangerous thought began to form, slow and tempting. If rich men married what looked rich, then what if she only needed to look the part? What if poverty was not the problem, but packaging? She stared at the ceiling, heart beating faster than reason. Maybe I don't need to change my life. Maybe I just need to change how it looks. Was it really wrong to borrow a little shine to escape a lifetime of darkness? Outside, December crept closer. And inside Caroline's heart, a dream was waking. One that would demand a terrible price. The words stayed with Caroline long after her mother walked away from the fire. Rich men don't marry suffering. They marry shine. It was said casually, without cruelty, but it landed like a quiet sentence passed by life itself. Caroline carried it with her as she washed plates, as she swept the compound, as she lay awake listening to the village settle into sleep. The sentence replayed in her mind, again and again, growing louder each time. That night, she opened her phone. At first, she told herself she was only passing time. But soon, her thumb moved with purpose, scrolling through pictures and videos that felt like windows into another world. Girls she recognized, some from nearby villages, some from even poorer homes than hers, now glowing in filtered light. Smooth hair flowed down their backs. Their smiles were confident. Their captions spoke of love, blessings, and answered prayers. They all looked expensive. Caroline studied them closely, not with envy alone, but with attention. None of them showed struggle. None of them showed tiredness. None of them showed the life she knew. They looked polished, prepared, complete. And the men beside them? Successful, well-dressed, smiling proudly. Was it love that brought these couples together, or presentation? She scrolled deeper, reading comments from strangers. You're lucky. You deserve this soft life. Goals. Each word fed the same conclusion, slowly erasing doubt. Looking rich was working. Caroline put the phone down and stared at her hands. Hands rough from work, hands that had carried water and firewood, hands that told her story without permission. She imagined those same hands holding a designer bag instead. Imagine stepping into church with heels clicking. Imagine heads turning for admiration, not pity. The difference between her and those girls no longer seemed like destiny. Felt like styling. A dangerous comfort settled in her chest. If shine was what attracted opportunity, then shine could be created. Borrowed even, just for a while. After all, she wasn't asking to stay fake forever. Just long enough to change her story. If I can look rich, they will treat me rich. She remembered the men who had passed her by without really seeing her. The way conversations ended quickly. The way interest faded once reality became clear. Suddenly, her mother's words no longer felt like wisdom. They felt like instructions. Rich men don't marry suffering, so suffering must be hidden. She began counting days in her head. December was short. Marriage talks happened fast. Introductions were made quickly. All she needed was one chance, one connection, one man who would look at her shine and believe it came from substance. What harm could 1 month of pretending really do? Outside, the night was calm, unaware of the storm forming in her mind. Inside, Caroline had crossed a line she didn't yet recognize. The lie no longer sounded like a lie. It sounded like hope. And hope, when mixed with desperation, is powerful enough to silence fear. December did not wait for courage. So Caroline began. Her first stop was the small salon near the roadside, where colorful posters of glamorous women smiled down from dusty walls. Auntie Blessing looked up from her chair when Caroline entered, eyes scanning her from head to toe. Natural hair, simple dress, nervous hands. I want Brazilian hair, Caroline said softly, pointing at the longest, smoothest bundle on display. The woman laughed, not unkindly. That one is expensive. I know, Caroline replied quickly. I'll pay after Christmas. Before New Year. Auntie Blessing studied her face for a long moment. She had seen this look before. Hope mixed with fear, ambition mixed with desperation. Finally, she nodded. January 2nd. If you don't pay, I remove it myself. 3 hours later, Caroline stared at her reflection, stunned. The hair fell down her back like borrowed confidence. For the first time, she felt visible. That was how it started. One promise, then another. She visited her friend Gloria, who worked in the city and lived in a rented room with dreams bigger than the space. Caroline admired the Gucci bag resting on the chair like royalty. Please, she said, lowering her voice, just for December. I'll return it immediately after. Gloria hesitated. This bag is expensive. I know. Nothing will happen. The bag was placed into Caroline's hands, heavy with trust. Next came the boutique. Red-bottom heels. Dresses that shimmered under fluorescent lights. Each request came with the same words, spoken more confidently now. After Christmas. Before New Year. I promise. Names were written into credit books. Amounts added up quietly. Warnings followed each agreement like shadows. Make sure you return it. Don't disappoint me. Time moves fast. But Caroline smiled through every warning. She believed she was racing against the calendar and winning. Every borrowed item changed how the world treated her. Shop owners spoke politely. Men looked twice. Girls whispered. She walked differently now, shoulders back, chin lifted. Confidence wrapped around her like perfume. This is working. Even the makeup artist had doubts. Payment first, she said firmly. I'll pay double, Caroline promised. Just give me Christmas. The word double erased caution. With each borrowed thing, Caroline felt stronger and lighter. Lighter because she no longer felt invisible. Lighter because hope had weight, and she was finally carrying it. But debt is patient. While she admired herself in mirrors, numbers grew quietly behind her. While she practiced smiles, receipts waited. While she counted days left in December, January waited too. Did she notice the fear rising beneath the excitement? Yes, but she pushed it away. After all, she told herself, she didn't plan to keep any of it. This was temporary. A bridge, not a home. Costume, not an identity. And besides, time was on her side. By mid-December, Caroline was no longer just borrowing beauty. She was borrowing belief. Belief from others. Belief from herself. Belief that one good outcome could erase many bad decisions. She did not yet understand that By mid-December, the village no longer saw Caroline the way it used to. The girl who once fetched water in worn slippers now walked slowly, deliberately, as if the ground itself deserved her attention. Brazilian hair flowed down her back, catching sunlight and turning heads. Her dresses fit perfectly, her bag rested on her arm like it belonged there, and her heels announced her presence before her voice ever did. People noticed. Women paused mid-conversation when she passed. Girls adjusted their own clothes, suddenly unsure of themselves. Men who had never looked twice now stared openly, curiosity and admiration mixing in their eyes. The same village paths she had walked for years felt different beneath her feet. She had become important. Church, seats shifted. At gatherings, space was made for her. Greetings sounded warmer, longer. Questions followed her everywhere. Where do you stay now? Are you working in the city? You've changed. Caroline smiled but answered little. Mystery, she learned, was also part of looking rich. Village boys who once spoke freely to her now stood aside, unsure of their place. Some laughed nervously. Others looked away, embarrassed by their own small offerings. She no longer belonged to their category, and everyone could feel it. Whispers followed her like a second shadow. They say she's doing business in town. Her bag alone can feed a family. She's not a small girl anymore. Each whisper fed her confidence. Each stare rewrote her identity. Caroline began to believe the version of herself the village had created. The borrowed life felt natural now, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Maybe this is who I was always meant to be. Even her mother watched quietly, worry hidden behind forced smiles. She asked fewer questions. The transformation was too big, too fast. But Caroline interpreted silence as acceptance. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw borrowed items. She saw a woman who had escaped her past. The fear that once lived in her chest softened, replaced by excitement and certainty. Had she really changed? Or had the world simply changed how it treated her? People respected what shined. And Caroline shined brightly. The attention felt good, too good. It filled spaces inside her that poverty had hollowed out for years. For the first time, she felt chosen, valued, seen. But behind the glow, behind the confidence, behind the whispers of admiration, something else waited quietly. The debts did not disappear. The promises did not dissolve. They only slept, patient and silent. Caroline did not hear their breathing. She walked through the village like borrowed royalty, unaware that crowns made of credit always fall harder. Every step forward took her further from the girl she was, and closer to a moment she could not yet imagine. Christmas Eve arrived, dressed in noise and light. The village square transformed as generators hummed. Music spilled into the night, and colored bulbs blinked stubbornly against the darkness. December had reached its peak. This was the night everyone waited for, the night when success returned home and displayed itself without apology. Caroline stood under a mango tree, calm on the outside, shaking inside. Her dress shimmered softly. Her Brazilian hair caught the moonlight. The designer bag rested beside her like a silent promise. Everything she wore was borrowed, but everything looked real. She looked like money. Then the sound came. A deep, confident engine cut through the music, and conversations thinned instantly. Heads turned. The black Range Rover rolled in slowly, deliberately, as if it knew it was being watched. Jude had arrived. He stepped out with the ease of a man who had nothing to prove. well-dressed, well-fed, confident in the quiet way money teaches. Whispers spread fast, carried by envy and admiration. That's Jude. From Lagos. He owns shops. He's not married. Every girl noticed him. But Caroline was ready. She did not rush. She did not stare. She stayed exactly where she was, scrolling through her phone as if wealth had already made her bored of attention. It was a performance, practiced and precise. Jude noticed. He approached, curiosity written on his face. Is this seat taken? Caroline looked up slowly, surprised, but not impressed. Oh no, please. Their conversation flowed easily. Jude asked questions, casual but calculated. Caroline answered smoothly, carefully choosing words that sounded confident without sounding desperate. Yes, I live mostly in town, she said lightly. I run a small boutique. Business is busy, but December is for family. Each lie slid out dressed as ambition. Each sentence built an image that did not exist. Jude nodded, impressed. He gestured toward her bag. Nice. Caroline smiled. This one? It's nothing. She spoke as if abundance was normal to her, as if 5 more waited at home, as if her life was full of choices, not debts. He believes me. The thought thrilled her. Jude leaned closer, clearly interested. You're different, he said. Not like the others. Those words wrapped around her heart like victory. They talked about business, travel, the city. Caroline painted a future she had never lived. Jude listened, seeing himself reflected in her imagined world. What he admired was not her story, but how well it matched his own. By the end of the night, the hook was set. I'm in the village until January, Jude said, pulling out his phone. Let me take you out properly. I'd like to meet your family. Caroline's breath caught. Around them, eyes watched. Whispers ignited. Jealousy burned silently. The village had seen it. Caroline had caught the big fish. As she walked home later, heels clicking against the road, her heart floated. Poverty felt far away. The future felt close. She did not notice how carefully everything depended on silence. The party ended, but Caroline could not sleep. Her heels still clicked in her mind. The music still hummed through her chest, and Jude's words repeated softly, as if whispered just for her. Let me take you out properly. I want to meet your family. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life without worry. A life where the well was deep, the food never ran out, and respect came naturally instead of being borrowed. She pictured her mother's face smiling proudly, neighbors whispering admiration instead of judgment, and herself, finally, safe from the weight of poverty. Her mind wandered through colors and textures. A wedding dress, perhaps ivory or burgundy. A small party in a neatly painted house in Lagos. A car that did not struggle through dirt roads, and shoes that never pinched. Could it really happen? She clutched her borrowed bag tightly on her lap, still smelling faintly of someone else's perfume, and imagined slipping it into a new life. Each borrowed item had been a step toward this dream. Each lie a bridge across the chasm she had lived in for so long. She told herself the future had been built, finally, from hope. Caroline's heart swelled with anticipation. She imagined waking up to the sight of Jude's smile, hand extended in kindness and admiration. She saw herself sitting beside him at a small breakfast table, laughter light and easy, free from hunger and endless chores. Perhaps, for once, the village wouldn't matter. Perhaps the world beyond her dirt roads would finally see her as someone worthy. I'm finally going to be seen, she thought, closing her eyes. The night stretched around her like a velvet promise. Outside, the harmattan wind whispered against the house, indifferent to her dreams. Inside, Caroline rehearsed greetings, practiced smiles, and imagined conversations where she never stumbled or faltered. She did not dwell on the cost of borrowed beauty, the unpaid debts, or the lies she had spun. They felt distant, irrelevant, invisible under the warmth of possibility. She pictured January 2nd, Jude arriving at her door, presenting gifts, praising her family, and taking her into a life she had only glimpsed through Instagram and imagination. The thought made her heart race, made her cheeks warm with excitement. The poverty, the struggle, the invisible girl she had been. They all seemed like someone else's story now. Caroline drifted to sleep, imagining a new life, one of soft fabrics, sparkling lights, and laughter that could not be bought but felt earned. She felt herself rising above the village, above the whispers, above the worn slippers and broken mirrors that had defined her for so long. Tomorrow would be the beginning. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would finally escape. But hope, when built on borrowed things, always carries its own shadow. The sun had barely risen, but Caroline's compound was already awake. She had woken early, excited and nervous, expecting the sound of tires announcing Jude's arrival. Instead, there was a different sound. A knock at the door, sharp and insistent. Auntie Blessing stood on the threshold first, arms crossed, eyes hard. "Caroline," she said, voice louder than necessary. "That hair. Remove it now or pay me 200,000. Caroline's stomach dropped. "This morning, please, Auntie," she pleaded, voice trembling. "Not today." Please not today, she thought, gripping the borrowed strands as if they could shield her. Before she could recover, Gloria appeared, face tight with anger, holding out the Gucci bag. "December is over. I need this back. Now." Caroline swallowed. Words stuck in her throat. The bag felt heavier in her hands than it ever had in her possession. Then Mama Chinidu arrived, red-bottom heels in hand. "Pay or these come with me," she said firmly. One by one, her debts came to life. Chioma, the fashion vendor, demanded her dresses. Mrs. Aids called for the jewelry. Beauty, the makeup artist, asked for double the agreed payment. Each person's arrival felt like a hammer against her chest. The village began to gather naturally, drawn to the drama like bees to honey. Children peered from behind doors. Neighbors whispered, pointing. The weight of her borrowed life pressed down on her. Caroline backed toward the center of the compound, barefoot now, heart racing. Her hair, her bag, her shoes, her dresses, everything she had relied on to feel powerful and admired, was being torn from her. Why now? Why did this have to happen before Jude even arrived? I thought time was on my side, she thought desperately, tears filling her eyes. The borrowed world she had so carefully built crumbled around her. Her reflection of confidence shattered with every demand, leaving only fear and exposure. Her mother came out, hands shaking, eyes wide. "Caroline, what is happening? Who are all these people?" Caroline couldn't answer. She could only watch as the truth of her promises, the debts, the lies, the borrowed glories, stood in front of her in full daylight. The village watched silently at first, then murmurs began, low and judgmental. "So this is the girl who wanted to be rich overnight. She isn't herself at all. Borrowed life, borrowed shame." The morning sun fell on her exposed feet, on her short, natural hair, on the empty hands that had carried borrowed dreams. The anticipation of wealth and freedom evaporated in the heat of reality. Caroline's heart pounded, but no sound came out. Debt had come first, and it came loudly. The roar of the Range Rover cut through the chaos like a blade. Caroline's heart jumped. She had imagined this moment countless times, but never like this. The engine stopped. Jude stepped out, gift box in hand, eyes widening at the scene before him. Her compound was alive with anger, voices raised, hands pointing. The borrowed hair lay tangled in Auntie Blessing's hands after rough, impatient snips. Her shoes were gone, carried away by Mama Chinidu. Dresses, bags, jewelry, all claimed back, all leaving her standing in a faded wrapper, old blouse and slippers with holes. Jude's gaze fell on her slowly, shock spreading like wildfire across his face. The confident, polished woman he had spoken to, laughed with, imagined, was gone. Is this really her? Caroline tried to smile, tried to explain, but words failed. The costumes of ambition and sophistication that had so convincingly dressed her in confidence were shredded. Every borrowed piece, every practiced line, every lie, all vanished in the harsh daylight of reality. "You lied about everything," Jude said quietly, voice heavy with disappointment rather than anger. I can explain, Caroline whispered, her own voice foreign to her ears. Explain what? He asked, stepping closer but keeping a careful distance. That you are not who I thought you were? That every word I admired was borrowed? That every image I believed in was a costume? The gift box in his hand slipped to the dusty ground. Jude looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not as the Enugu boutique owner, not as the sophisticated village girl, not as the woman who could walk among the city's lights, but as Caroline, the frightened, desperate, real girl behind the borrowed glory. Her breath caught. This is what happens when the lies catch up. The village whispered again, not in curiosity now but in judgment. Some shook their heads, others laughed quietly. Her mother's hand touched her shoulder, trembling, offering silent comfort where words could not. Jude's eyes were filled with something heavier than disappointment. Hurt. I thought I found someone real, he said, voice low. But all I found was a costume. The Range Rover's engine roared again. He turned, walked back to the car, leaving her in the glare of the sun, exposed and trembling. Caroline ran after him, bare feet scraping against the dust. But 3 steps were all she managed before the weight of reality stopped her. A message buzzed in her hand. From Jude. Number blocked. Don't contact me again. The village had gathered their satisfaction. The performance was over. The borrowed world had been stripped away, leaving only shame, loss, and the painful clarity of truth. Caroline stood in her mother's compound, alone, humiliated, and painfully aware that the life she had wanted so desperately was never hers to take. The Range Rover's dust had barely settled when the crowd began to move away. Caroline stood in the middle of her compound, bare feet dusty, hair short and uneven from anti-blessing scissors, wrists empty of bracelets, hands free of borrowed bags. The silence of the aftermath pressed against her like a heavy cloth. Where moments ago there had been admiration, envy, and attention, now there was only the raw truth of her life. Neighbors whispered as they left. Some shook their heads, some laughed quietly, others simply stared. The lesson had been delivered, and the village would not forget it. Her mother came to her side, soft hand on her shoulder. My daughter, Mama, she said gently. I know you wanted to escape. I know you wanted what others have. But look where borrowed things have led. Caroline's throat tightened. Words failed her. She looked down at her torn dress, at her slippers with holes, at the ground she had always known so well. Everything she had built in pride and hope had disappeared before the eyes of the village, before the eyes of the man she wanted to impress. Was it worth it? She thought. Was escaping this life only meant to leave me humiliated? The cold truth pressed in. Borrowed hair, borrowed bags, borrowed shoes, borrowed success, they had all vanished. And with them, the attention she thought would bring love, respect, and freedom. The village would tell this story for years. They would tell it at gatherings, in markets, at church. Remember Caroline? They would say. The girl who borrowed a rich life and lost herself. Even Caroline remembered it, every single detail. The confidence that was not hers, the lies that sounded like ambition, the smile that was borrowed, and the heartbreak that came when the truth arrived. Yet, in that painful clarity, a new understanding grew. Humiliation was sharp, but it was honest. Poverty, she realized, was a small burden compared to the weight of falsehood. The simplicity of her life, the honesty of her mother's love, and the truth of who she was, these could never be taken away. Caroline closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. She knew she would return to her old life, yes, but with something she had never had before. The lesson that borrowed glory always comes due. And when the village remembered, they would remember her mistake. Not her beauty, not her borrowed confidence, but the cost she paid for pretending. She opened her eyes, faced the sun, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a strange relief. She had lost much, but she had regained herself. The future would not be easy, but it would be real.